Friends, recently I have seen a movie called The Bride. And it is an American, this gothic horror movie is directed by Maggie Gyllenhaal, and this film is inspired by the 1935 movie Bride of Frankenstein. So today, in this video, we will know the story of the film The Bride, and talk about its ending. Now before starting the video, I have a request to all of you, that if you like this video, then please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Please tell me that's said. Let's roll the intro. So at the beginning of the movie, we see Mary Shelley in the afterlife. For those who don't know about Mary Shelley, I should tell them that Mary Shelley was an English writer who was most famous for her novel Frankenstein. He wrote this story at a very young age, and it became a classic of science fiction and horror. Anyway, in the afterlife, we would have Mary say a monologue. We hear her saying that she has been stuck in this afterlife for a long time. He did write the story of Frankenstein, but she died in 1851 due to a brain tumor before she could finish her story. But now she sees a crack through which she can complete her incomplete story. How? Well, it's 1936, and there's a girl named Ida in Chicago who she'll be courting. From here, the scene shifts to Ida, a restaurant. It happens and here, there were only mob people around Ida. We all know that during the 1930s, America was ruled by mob bosses and gangsters. And Ida was a girl who was under the control of the mob. That is, she would rise at the behest of the mob, sitting, being intimate, and all that. Now initially, Ida was completely normal, but friends, she is absolutely poised by Mary Shelley, and she climbs on the table and starts saying weird things with an English accent, like she starts exposing the crimes of the mob members. In fact, she even started exposing the crimes of mob boss Lupino. She started doing all this because she was possessed by me. Lupino was right there at the bar counter, where he signals for Ida to be finished. Then, two Lupinos, named Clyde and James, the two of them grab Ida and take her out of the place, where Ida is still saying strange things. James even slaps Ida. And in the midst of all this, we get a moment as if Clyde has sympathy for Ida. But the next moment, Clyde pushed Ida down the stairs. He gives it, and Ida gets injured by this fall and ends up. From here, the scene shifts to Chicago, where a man is trying to find a mad scientist. Dr. Cornelia comes to visit Euphronius at his place. We realize that this guy was Frankenstein's monster, and that he was Dr. Cornelia. He came to me because he needed a partner, yes, friends. Frankenstein was created in 1819, and since then, there have been over 100 years have passed. In fact, the time is now 1936. And Frankenstein is still all alone. And that's why he needed a partner. Frankenstein, Dr. Cornelia's books. I had read a book where he talked about reanimating dead tongues and many more science discoveries. And so Frankenstein hoped that Dr. Cornelia would help him can create an undead for. Now friends, there is a strong element of feminism in this entire scene. There is a pinpoint, which we will see again and again throughout the movie. For example, here is when Frankenstein visits Dr. Cornelia. When he came, he did not know what Dr. Cornelia would look like. That's why Frankenstein assumed it must be a boy. But to his surprise, Dr. Cornelia was a lady. Anyway, Dr. Cornelia observes him. She does a checkup, but she wasn't convinced she could reanimate a dead woman. Frankenstein stays at his place. Now that night, we find Frankenstein watching a movie in which there was an actor named Ronnie Reed. Frankenstein was such a big fan of Ronnie that I used to watch movies not just once, but countless times. Not only this, he himself dances in place of Ronnie in the film. He also used to imagine, and he remembered all the dialogues of the film. Anyway, the next morning, Frankenstein and Dr. Cornelia have another argument where Frankenstein tells Dr. Cornelia that she was the first person to shake his hand. She agrees. And then what happened? That night, both of them went digging in a nearby graveyard. By doing this, they steal the dead body of a random woman and feed it to her. And this lady was none other than Aida. When Frankenstein sees Ida, he finds her very beautiful, and Frankenstein was like, they couldn't find this beautiful lady alive. I should do it because she is too beautiful for him. These people will dig again tomorrow and bring some unbeautiful looking lady. But Dr. Cornelia says she will do it either today or never. Yes, Frankenstein had no option, and in such a situation, Dr. Cornelia used her machines, etc., connects it to Aida's body, injects some fluids into it, and the experiment begins by shorting out the electricity at a point and creating sparks, and so on, they fly. After which we see Aida alive. Yes, friends, Aida is alive. She had passed away, but she had no recollection of who she was. She suddenly vomited, where a crystalloid solution comes out of his mouth. And this is a solution that, for this experiment, the solution was injected into Aida's body. This stain remained on Ida's body, and it remains permanently on the face. Now, when Ida died after falling down the stairs, she also suffered a broken leg, which is why she is currently unable to walk. Dr. Cornelia Iceda, she convinces him to let her bandage his wounds, and friends, here comes Aida, does not even remember his name. Dr. Cornelia and Frank tell Aida that she's the bride of Frankenstein and has lost her memory due to an accident. Aida, she agrees to this, and Dr. Cornelia asks Aida to spend the night there. That night, Frankenstein happily returns to Ronnie's same movie, where he again sees himself dancing. Imagine doing this now. The next morning when Ida wakes up, she finds Frankenstein. Aida finds him sleeping under her desk, blows on him, and Frankenstein he attacks Ida because his natural action was self-defense. But Frankenstein immediately realizes that this was Ida, and then he apologizes to Ida. And just then, Dr. Cornelia enters the room. She invites Ida and Frankenstein over for breakfast, where she says she'll be doing some test runs on the Ida today. But friends, Aida wanted to be free, and that doctor, to resist Cornelia's advances, she begins breaking cups and such. Dr. Cornelia locks Aida and Frankenstein back in the room. But friends, both of them escape from the balcony. So the adventure of these two is going to start from here. But before telling you that, let me tell you two details which are very important. The first detail is that one of Dr. Cornelia's assistants also had a maid who, the name is Greta, and another detail is that my repeated poses to Aida, which would cause Ida to suddenly start speaking strange things with a British accent. Strange things that Mary wants to say, and mostly women here. Anyway, there was always talk of traveling. So first of all, Frankenstein and Aida went to a theater, go to watch Ronnie's movie, and Frankenstein tells Ida how Ronnie, his favorite actor is Ronnie in childhood, and doctors said he would never be able to walk again. But Ronnie not only recovered, but is now one of the best dancers. Ronnie has one leg shorter, but he wears special shoes so that his balance remains perfect, and because of this, he dances very well, and no one can even say that he had any kind of disease. After listening to this story, we viewers can clearly understand is why Frankenstein liked Ronnie so much. Because like him, Ronnie was also not normal. But today, the world has accepted him. In fact, he is one of the most loved stars. Frankenstein sees himself in Ronnie, hoping that one day the world will be similar to him. She will accept me now. After the movie, both of them go to a party in a shady area, i.e. dance club. As it was, we go to where Aida starts dancing. Frankenstein introduces himself as Aida. He imagines dancing with her, and Aida also gets her makeup done by some ladies there. Then suddenly some perverts surround Aida on the dance floor and molest her inappropriately. So Aida and Frankenstein leave the party. But friends, they come out chasing Aida and attack Frankenstein. They proceed to do wrong to Aida, but then Frankenstein attacks the two men. He attacks them and kills them right there. Before Frankenstein and Aida escape, a random guy standing nearby takes some photos of them. Frankenstein then escapes with Aida, and they both run to a building. Frankenstein climbs up the building and retrieves his belongings from inside an apartment. He also brings a paper cutting which had Ronnie's pictures with some news. Frankenstein tells Aida to get away from him, or she too will be trapped. But friends, Aida doesn't leave Frankenstein, because Aida did not even know who she was and where she lived. In such a situation, Frankenstein takes Aida away with him, after which, friends, we are shown a strange scene where Aida's head is in a glass. He was imprisoned, and Mary was asking him, "Are you going to marry Frankenstein?" Aida is suffocating, and Mary tells her to find your name somewhere, Aida. Her mental condition is described as how she is trapped, and she cannot even control herself. I recognize that all this was of course Aida's vision, because in reality, Aida and Frankenstein, they ran away and hid on a cargo train. The police could not find them, but suddenly Mary gets angry and starts shouting, due to which the police finds them. By then, the cargo train had started, and the policeman sees Frankenstein's scary face, so he proceeds to fire his pistol, but not before he shoots Frankenstein. Carta Aida pushes him, causing him to fall off the train. Now in the next scene. In it, we see Detective Jake Wills and his assistant, Myrna Mello. We understand from their conversation that they are going to work on the case of Frankenstein and Aida, that Myrna is much better at detective work than Jake, but she's still just an assistant. This is because the society is male-dominated, i.e. patriarchal, where people believe that girls, detectives Myrna and Jake, investigate a crime scene where Frankenstein had finished two people, and there they were made into one person called Frankenstein. And Ira's pictures are available. Remember, a guy had taken her pictures after this. The two detectives go to the train tracks, where a policeman was found dead, and the officers present there also treat Myrna as if she is a lady of crime. What are you doing on the scene? Whatever it is, Myrna finds a paper cutting here in which Ronnie, and friends, this is the same paper cutting of Frankenstein. I mean, it must have fallen here in the scuffle. This leads Myrna to assume that Frankenstein is a fan of Ronnie's, because the theater guy in Chicago gave a statement upon interrogation that yes, I've seen that Frankenstein-like guy who would come to the theater every day and watch the same Ronnie movie. By the way, these detectives have also found out that Frankenstein would be in New York, because this train went there. So yeah, now Jake and Marnina are going to New York to catch Frankenstein. Meanwhile, Frankenstein and Aida have reached New York, where Frankenstein first collects the things thrown into the wishing fountain. Then both of them stop at an abandoned place. Their photo had appeared in this paper, where it was written that Frankenstein and his bride are wanted. Here, Ida asks Frankenstein her name, like, what's my name? And Frankenstein says the Ginger first. Dan says, no, your name is not Ginger, I was just joking. Your real name is Penelope Rogers. By the way, Ida likes both these names. At this point, Ida tries to become intimate with Frankenstein, but Frankenstein refuses to do so. Well, we viewers notice that even though the world sees Frankenstein as a strong killer monster, but in reality he lives in a lot of pain and even has nerve problems. Now that night, Frankenstein returns to New York to take Aida home. He starts taking her to see Ronnie's films. Meanwhile, Jake and Myrna have also arrived in New York and are wandering around the theater. Near the theater where Ronnie's film was playing, because they knew Frankenstein would come to see Ronnie's movie. At the end moment, Ida shows Frankenstein another film because she didn't want to watch Ronnie's movie over and over again. So yes, a movie called Frankenstein and Ida Revolt of the Zombies. We start to see a man and a woman lying in the hall. Bandy was saying no in excitement, and Ida thinks that Banda is with her. He is doing something wrong, and the prisoner is refusing, and that is why she starts shouting at the man. Then that guy sees that this is Stein, and his bride means they were on the front page of the paper. Everyone knew him, and in such a situation, the guy starts shouting. This causes chaos in the hall, and Frankenstein and Ida flee. By now, the show has reached the detectives, and they too run towards the mob. Frankenstein and Ida run into a building, let's enter, where a very high-class party was going on. Both of them immediately start serving food and drinks like waiters. And at this point, Frankenstein notices that Ronnie was also at the party. In fact, it was probably Ronnie's party, yes, friends. He immediately removes his face cover and starts talking to Ronnie about how Ronnie inspired him. And Frankenstein gives Ronnie the credit for even surviving his life, saying how Ronnie smiled at Frankenstein during an event in 1917. Tickets are with Frankenstein till today. Very happy to see these general friends. Frankenstein, Ronnie. And I was behaving like a fan would behave, but Ronnie Frankenstein. Ronnie clearly says that Frankenstein was feeling disgusted by the looks and smell of he's not her type. This hurts Frankenstein deeply, and he immediately starts doing the Ronnie dance. Aida joins him, and the next moment, several people have arrived at the party. Maybe they pass by me, and they also start dancing. Ronnie was fascinated by this sight, and then Jay and Myrna enter with some policemen. Jake gives a slightly strange expression when he sees Ida as if he knows her. Anyway, the police start attacking Frankenstein, and chaos ensues. Amidst all this, Aida picks up the pistol and points it at Ronnie, saying that if anyone hurts Frankenstein, she'll hug Ronnie. Ida then returns to Kinda Mary, where she starts exposing the people who came to the party, like how the men here were misbehaving with the women who had come to the party. At one point, a police officer approaches Aida, but Aida shoots him and kills him. This causes chaos here, and Frankenstein somehow rescues Aida by dropping the chandelier. The two kiss on the street outside, where I felt guilty because she had dealt with a policeman. But Frankenstein consoles him. Just then, Jake arrives and tells them to stop, but by then, both of them run away. Again, from Jake's expression in this scene, it seems like as if he knows Aida somehow. Next, we are shown some scenes where Frankenstein and Aida become intimate. Then Frankenstein tattoos Ida's name on his chest. He gets it done. Ida, I didn't get it written because Frankenstein knows the name Ida. Not only that, it's rather written as Penelope, because that's the name Frankenstein gave her. Then these people, we were watching Ronnie's movies, enjoying ourselves, and moving around the country, stealing cars. By now, Frankenstein and Ida had become very famous, and their photos were everywhere. It was on the front page of a newspaper. In fact, Ida of Frankenstein and other crimes were being committed, such as stealing, and all through which news of Aida's crimes kept coming. Dr. Cornelia, and it had reached Greta as well, in fact, Ida, who gave a monologue about the woman's operation. There was this party. Many women started resonating with it. That's why in the whole city, a revolution had taken place, and women began to dress like Aida and face her. And by making marks on their bodies, women started reclaiming their rights. She was fighting, committing crimes on the streets. And this entire revolution was called a brain attack. It was being spoken because Ida used this word during her monologue at the party. Meanwhile, news of Aida reaches mob boss Lupino, leading Clyde to, and James had said that he had killed Ida and buried her, but Ida was still alive. It was on the front page of a newspaper, and Lupino believed that Clyde James was her. He shoots James on the spot for lying and threatens Clyde. What kind of task does Clyde give? Well, Clyde must somehow deal with Ida. She knows a lot about the business of looks. Now, who will tell Lupino that Ida has actually died and come back to life? and that she has lost her memory. Well, friends, here we can see many human tongues cut off in the winter behind Lupino. There is a tongue, and this describes how Lupino has the tongues of those who speak against him severed. In fact, I have made a collection of it. And if we talk about Jake and Myrna, these people following the trails of Frankenstein and Aida, but reports of his visit to various places have come out in the public. Jake was somehow showing sympathy towards Aida. In fact, it was started by her. He was also supporting the gay movement. In conversation, Myrna says that she knows where will Frankenstein and Aida go next. Actually, Myrna notices a pattern where Frankenstein was visiting the same locations as the movie Somehow Ronnie, and if the patterns are analyzed, then next these people went to Cancer City, then many others cities. And that's why Myrna was like, finally these people are going to Niagara Falls. So Myrna and Jake also leave for Niagara Falls. Myrna says that because in this case, he found more clues, so he should get the credit for solving it. But Jake was like, this patriarchal world will not be able to accept this. On the other hand, Frankenstein and Aida were driving around in a stolen car, and here Frankenstein meets Aida. He also tells a false story about how he proposed to her, and then a police card was found in his, comes behind, and they have to stop their car. Frankenstein covers himself and Aida. She tells the policeman that this is my sick uncle. And friends, this policeman was not a good person, because he was Aida. He starts taking advantage of not having car papers or license. I mean, he touches her inappropriately, and even tries to do something wrong. Then Frankenstein takes out the cop with a gun, but by then, the policeman's partner shoots Aida in the stomach. In such a situation, Frankenstein also kills the policeman's partner. Mary's influence comes back to IATA, where, in anger, she tears off the policeman's tongue with her teeth. Frankenstein manages to catch him, after which they abandon the car and escape. The scene shifts to the city of Niagara Falls, where the detectives have arrived, along with Clyde. Also came to this place to hunt Aida. Clyde, actually killing and tracking Jake, had reached there. Frankenstein and Aida had also arrived there, where Frankenstein and Aida, he bandages the wound, but Aida was in a different mood. She was revolting because she doesn't want such a life, and then suddenly she fires gunshots in the air. Jake comes to this place after hearing the voice, and he calls Aida by her real name. He calls out to Aida. Aida also feels the same way as if she knew Jake, and here, Aida feels for the first time as if she were rather Ginger, or Penelope, or Pretty Penny. There is someone else. Jake starts saying that he is responsible for Aida's condition. He says sorry. It seems that the one who finds the situation very strange, only then he knows how to hit on the spot, and she shoots at Frankenstein, hitting him. Aida then shoots Jake in the leg. She escapes with Frankenstein, but by this point, Aida knows. It was revealed that Frankenstein lied to her, that she was his bride and all, and this led to Aida and Frankenstein begin to have a falling out. They both steal a car and run away. At this point, Frankenstein finally tells Aida the truth about how Frankenstein was created. Then he should have participated, and that's why Aida, he was dug out from the graveyard and brought back to life. On the other hand, we see injured Jake, and he tells Marnina how he knows Aida. Aida actually worked for Jake, where she infiltrated Lupino's gang at Jake's behest. She used to stay there and gather information about the mobs and secretly tell it to Jake. At one point, Jake and his police team, there was enough evidence to take action against Lupino, but perhaps Lupino used her power, which caused the case to kind of drop. This worries Aida greatly, and one night she goes to Jake's. She came to the office where Jake and Aida got intimate. Jake was determined to help Aida handle Lupino, but before that, the news came that Aida is no more in this world. But now Jake is very surprised because Aida is alive. And so Jake had a lot of sympathy for Aida. At this point, Jake resigns and makes Myrna the lead detective for the same reason. And if we talk about Frankenstein Aida, then both of them are driving. They go to a drive-in theater where Ronnie's film is playing. Sort the differences and Frankenstein to propose ideas. Parallel to this, Myrna goes to a store where Frankenstein, there were reports of her being seen. And here she asks a lady, where is the nearest theater? The lady tells Myrna about the drive-in theater, and Myrna goes there too. She arrives, and Clyde, following Myrna, also arrives at the scene. So this situation becomes such that killing is right, like Frankenstein and Aida's car. While Frankenstein gives Aida a kind of, Aida says she's Ginger. Penelope isn't Pretty Penny or Aida. Rather, she'll call herself the bride from now on. She's the bride, not anybody's bride, not Frankenstein's bride. Rather, she is, in general, the bride, that is, friends. One's own identity. All this is going on when Clyde shoots, and the bullet hits Frankenstein directly in the head. Yes, friends, in this case, Aida, should we say the bride? She somehow manages to get Frankenstein into the car and drive him away. At this point, something dangerous happens, but the bride somehow escapes and then goes straight to Dr. Cornelia's laboratory. The bride asks Dr. Cornelia to bring Frankenstein back to life, but Dr. Cornelia flatly refuses, and she also confirms it, that Frankenstein is no longer alive, so the bride attacks him. And at this point, we viewers notice a few things. The first being that Dr. Cornelia, the helper, Greta, also did the same makeup as the bride, which means she was also the bride. And by this point, Clyde is inside the lab. and Myrna had also arrived, having been secretly listening to the conversation between the bride and Dr. Cornelia. Anyway, here Dr. Cornelia tells that she used to have a husband named George, and both of them loved each other very much. No one touched the work of both of them. That's why both of them used to do experiments on each other. These people used to do relativity time. We were working on topics like dilation ripples and curvature of space-time. It didn't work, but one day George died. In such a situation, Dr. Cornelia brought her husband back to life. But friends, George's memory did not come back. He was a little off, and he was in his mind. He was unable to keep her husband stable, due to which Dr. Cornelia killed her own husband. Saying this, Dr. Cornelia cries and says that she may also be blessed with a bride. It tells us that we wanted to destroy the thing which scientists call well-behaved geometry, the point where all known laws are valid. We wanted to see a disobedient geometry. What is it like? How does it look? And when you see it, you will know. Turns out she looks like you, like the bride. Clyde and Myrna were listening to all this, and Clyde and Myrna didn't even know they were there. But at this point, Clyde shoots the bride, and now, by then, many policemen had also arrived here who shot the bride. The bride ends up taking several pills and collapsing on top of Frankenstein's body. Margina stops everyone from shooting, but the police were not listening to her, meaning he is a senior, still a detective. In fact, after the shooting, when Marana says that she is a detective, so the cops make faces like, how can a woman be a detective? Marjana tells all the policemen to leave the lab, saying that there is a man outside. Gotta go get her. I mean, she's talking about Clyde, then here we go, Greta. And when we see Dr. Cornelia talking to each other, the scene suddenly shifts to me, which seems to say that there will never be a story as amazing as Frankenstein and his bride. The scene then cuts to outside the lab, where the police arrest Clyde. I've already done. And friends, let me tell you here that Clyde is so desperately blessed, was hunting him, because mob boss Lupino threatened him with the life of his wife and child. Was threatening. Here we also see Marnana, who notices that lightning struck the lab upstairs. Inside the lab, it is shown that Frankenstein and the bride's fingers move and hold each other's hands. That means, friends, finally Dr. Cornelia experimented. She brings them both back to life, and the film ends there. Now, the movie also has a post-credits scene where we see Jake, and there were several girls around her in the bride makeup. These girls protested against the bride and had captured mob boss Lupino. Yes, friends, Lupino was in their custody. And behind, we see a lot of detached tongues, free. All of them would be applying the bride makeup on Lupino. And it depicts that these people will deal with Lupino. The post-credits scene also ends here. So friends, this was the story and scene of the movie The Bride. It was clear that Frankenstein and the bride were back to life. In fact, Jake might now be independently hunting Lupino. And with the help of the women from the revolt group, he is able to capture Lupino. No more theories here from the story point of view, but there are many hidden meanings in this film, which we will talk about now. Keep in mind that what I am saying here is what the film wants to say, and not what I am saying from my own mind. I am sharing some personal opinions, first of all from director Maggie Gyllenhaal herself. Explained at a press conference that when he made 1935's Bride of Frankenstein, when he saw the film, he realized that the bride appears on screen for only 2 minutes. She doesn't speak, she just screams once, and then she is blown away into a world. It was made for a man, and he was not given any choice. Seeing this Maggie it was a shock that they thought the character should have a voice, but in the film, this is not just the voice of the bride, but also the voice of Mary. And both are from the same actress. Jessie Buckley plays this casting decision is not a coincidence, it is a deliberate, it's an artistic statement. The real theory is that Mary Shelley couldn't say all that in her life. What she wanted to say, that is, in her life, in her work, now in her afterlife, becoming a possessor. She always says through Aida the same things that she had once suppressed. This possession is not just a horror element. Rather, it is a metaphor for the suppressed female voice. General Hall suspects that Mary Shelley had much more to say than just the 1820s. It was unpublishable, in fact it was unthinkable as well, so this possession was basically my unfinished. There is a business which she is completing through this film. Another very subtle detail is the dark spots on the bride's face. The visual concept of the production is the ink from Mary Shelley's manuscript coming out, meaning a woman who has been buried under the ground for 2 centuries and could not complete her sentence. Mary's unfinished story is literally written on the body of the bride. This is a very poetic visual idea. And friends, please also note that my only bride, she does not pose for anyone, rather she poses with many people together in the party scene. Due to which dance started happening here, this currently suggests that Mary's rage is from one of the bodies. It is not limited to this, in fact it is a collective force, an energy that spreads. When people resonate with her, this scene symbolically shows that women are suppressed. Rage is not an individual problem. It is rather a shared, collective experience. And the interesting angle is that the crack that Mary saw in her life through, she can finish her story. She cracks actually Ida's moment of vulnerability. When she was alone and suppressed in the crowd, she poses when a woman, it is the most silenced, she is the most controlled, and the most oppressed. This situation occurs when patriarchy is at its peak. And at that very moment, the rage spreads. And this, friends, was the core idea of the film. Now, brain attack movement is that part of the film which should not be understood only on the surface level. Superficial shows that women rebel because of brides. It happened. But there is a lot of layer commentary behind this movement. For example, Maggie Gyllenhaal herself said in an interview to Deadline that you make a movie about Bride of Frankenstein and bring it to the Conan table. It is not possible not to keep it, because fundamentally he did not agree to all this. We are not born as grown women, and we are not made to be. We are told we were created to marry someone else. Meaning, the feminism of this film is not just on the surface level of girl power. Rather, this is a fundamental matter of consent and bodily autonomy. The bride was created without consent, brought to life without consent, an identity given without consent, like Ginger, Penelope, Pretty Penny, and the Bride of Frankenstein. But each of these identities was given by someone else, and so when he finally became himself, when she calls him the bride, he says, "I'm not just any door's bride. I'm not even the Bride of Frankenstein. I am just the bride." And that's when this act becomes revolutionary. The brain attack movement seen in the film, in it, women wear bridal makeup, put black spots on their faces. These stains are the ink of my style, as I told you. But for these women, it becomes an act of reclaiming, meaning the thing that happened to the bride's body due to the accident, the thing that these women deliberately chose. It symbolically shows that when a woman, society tries to shame any imperfection or abnormality of a woman, and if you embrace it, that imperfection becomes a weapon. And one more thing you should pay attention to, friends. During this bride's run, the women start a movement. They commit crimes, they are on the streets, meaning the film is saying that the system will never voluntarily give freedom to women. That's why sometimes one has to commit a crime, and if seen, the bride herself is also a criminal. The angle of the film is that when women are marginalized, and when she is abused, she invariably unleashes her monster side to seek justice. One theory that critics and analysts have pointed to is that Myrna and the bride's movement is going on parallel throughout the film. Miranda, clearly more intelligent and capable as a detective, but he's still an assistant because society is patriarchal and believes that girls can't be detectives. This shows that the revolution is not just on the streets, it is everywhere, even in so-called respectable institutions like law enforcement and killing, lead to the film's ending. She becomes a detective, meaning the direct effect of the bride's movement is at the institutional level. This also happened on a kind of hopeful note for the film. So friends, let's now talk about the film. Is the actual soul of Rajas, meaning on the surface it looks like a remake of the Frankenstein story, but actually this is a story asking, what if suppressed rage gets the body? So what happens is, the bride speaks in borrowed voices throughout the film, first of my wife and then of Melville's Bart Leiby's famous line, "I would prefer not to then marry Wollstonecraft." This proto-feminist ideology, and only finds her voice when she reinvents herself as the bride. She gives a name. This is a very important detail. She had 3 identities: Aida, who was my first planted Roger, which Frankenstein gave, meaning through a lie, and then the bride, which she chose herself. So yes, this film is essentially the story of identity formation of such a woman. The story of someone who the world repeatedly gives a name, a box, a role, and who finally gets rid of all these. She refuses her very famous line, "Breakfast time, P. I would prefer not to do this line." Somewhere the ultimate symbol of passive resistance is now a very interesting theory. What is deeply encoded in the film is Dr. Cornelia's talk about dissociative geometry. Dr. Cornelia says that her experiment, well-behaved geometry, i.e. physics, see that point where all non-laws are valid? She wants to destroy that very thing. She wanted to see what dissociative geometry looked like, and discovered it was the bride. The way she looks, the rules of society, are about how a woman should be and how she should behave. How to dress, who to accept, all this is well-behaved geometry, the bride. It breaks all these rules. That is why it is dissociative geometry. And the film wants to say that it's disobedience, beautiful. It is revolutionary, it is necessary. Another layer that many people miss is the parallel between Frankenstein and Ronnie Reed. Frankenstein's monster is a creature that the world considers a monster. He is inspired by Ronnie Reed because Ronnie had polio in childhood. Doctors said he would never walk again, but now he's a beloved star. Frank sees himself in Ronnie, hoping that one day the world will treat him in similar ways. And when Ronnie meets Frank in person, he dismisses her. "I am disgusted by his looks and smell." This moment is quite ironic, because Ronnie Reed himself was an outsider who is now part of the system. He has become one, and as soon as he became a part of the system, he lost his empathy. This is commentary on assimilation. When marginalized people are accepted, he starts rejecting those who are still out there. And finally, friends, Gyllenhaal entertainment. She tells The Weekly that a person who had so much to say was silenced so much. What if you put your hand on the geyser when it finally erupts? It will spread with energy. And this is what happens with this character. This analogy is the same throughout the film. Mary Shelley was a geyser. Ida was a geyser. The bride was a geyser, and the movement that started because of him was also a geyser. The film says that separation is temporary, but rage is permanent, and when it finally comes out, the world is changed. Well, one subtle detail is that Ronnie's character is Jake Gyllenhaal, who is the brother of director Maggie Gyllenhaal. There are many more such subtle details in the film, but if we start talking about each frame, the video will become longer than the film. So here I have told you the complete story of the movie. Also, I have told you the message of the film and the theories. I hope you liked my explanation. If you liked it, then like and share the video. Also, if you are new to the channel, please subscribe to us because we keep bringing such videos on our channel. Peace.